So, on this first episode of Kingdom Reality, we have a really special guest, Vern Porter, who goes to our church. He's a Sunday school teacher here. He's very knowledgeable about the Bible, very knowledgeable about all kinds of prophetic things, the book of Revelation. So, we're going to have a discussion about end times, about all kinds of stuff. But first, let's get a little bit about who you are. Where'd you grow up?
So I'm a disc plant from Ohio. I grew up in the middle of Ohio, joined the Navy and to see the world. I saw some of the world, but not all the world. And I retired. My last duty station was here in Richmond, so I kind of got into the whole "you will stay here" scenario. Married a lady who grew up in a fan, and we're staying. I mean, Ohio is pretty. For a long time, it's been pretty desolate from the lack of the auto industry and steel industry, and so there was nearly nothing there to go back to. So it's stay here. After I retired from the Navy, I took a job in engineering consulting. It was a high travel job. It was I don't call it travel, but it is travel. I mean, I called it I live here, but I work somewhere else, because it would be leave on Monday, come home on Friday, and every week you were going to the same place for 2-3 years. It was always too long to tolerate, but never long enough to move for, if you can picture that.
Yeah.
So I did some travel back and forth to Los Angeles for a couple of years, Denver for a couple of years. I mean, just all around doing that consulting work. And I found myself in a place where I got Monday through Thursday night, I can watch TV, pollute my brain, or I can start reading. God reached out to me a long time ago. He stopped me from suicide at one point in my life. And so he had always been there and been acknowledged, but I never really acted on that, never really walked in it. So I found myself in a hotel room with the opportunity to start walking in that. And so I started doing some Bible studies online with some different church groups, did some just general YouTube preacher watching videos, and just a lot of self-study. And I tried to be very careful every time to wait and let God tell me whether I was going down the right path or wrong path. And everything I kept getting over and over again was, if you stay in the Bible, then you won't go wrong.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you think about it. All these folks out there preach things that they've been told, but they've never really looked at. They stop at one verse when the next verse is really the key to the understanding, and they use commentaries. I mean, and there's a zillion commentaries out there. And my take very, very, very soon became, if I want to know how, just pick on Matthew Henry. Matthew Henry's going to heaven. I can read about that, but that's not necessarily how Vern's going to heaven.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was written in 1804, I think, 1800s. The world's a whole lot different in 2000. So that's how I came to my knowledge. Is it formal training? No, but I think it's God-backed training. I have not run into a situation yet where I can't find the answer in the Bible. We'll put it that way. Now, Revelations is kind of a little bit different because some of it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Right? The rest of it's easy because you read the Bible, you say, well, what does that really mean? And you go back and dig and you find the reference. But Revelations, when you start going down that road, that's yet to occur. So there's a little bit of, what does this mean, God? Activity going on there. But that's me.
Now, you don't have to talk about this, but you glossed over it so quickly. But it sounds like an amazing story. You said God saved you from suicide.
Yeah, so I was, this is not my first marriage. So I was in a situation where I was seeing a lady who had problems, let's just be honest. And she had a child who had been taken by the state. And it was up to the time of permanent, what do they call it? Permanent adoption or return to the family. Well, the family in this case was a single woman. So, and I don't even remember all the details, but suddenly I found the court giving me custody of this child. And I, you know how you know you're being disobedient?
Yeah.
And you feel God going, but you just don't want to turn around and look.
Yeah, I'm fully aware.
So that was going on, and I was just really getting just into my rope, I guess I'll say. And I was babysitting her one night, and I just said, you know what, that's it. So there was, in the town I lived in, there was a big park with a huge oak tree right in the middle of the parking lot. Pretty easy in the car I had to get to 100 before you got to the tree. So I picked my tree, I surveyed the area, and I was kind of just driving around waiting for my time to return her to her mother. And I was going down a road. It's kind of it's in town, but it's kind of desolate. It was one of those big town, small town things where there's fields kind of at the outskirts.
Okay.
And there's a hitchhiker. And I remember saying to myself, well, you know what? If I pick this guy up and he kills me, then my problem's solved. So I stop, and he gets in the car, and we had a conversation. He said some things to me that were very revealing. I think the conversation started with, do you know why there's 30 Psalms and 150 Proverbs and 31 Psalms? No. Well, that's I think I got this backwards. It's a proverb a day, 31 Proverbs. That's a proverb a day and 5 Psalms a day except for the 31st. I'm like, okay, who are you? And I picked up hitchhiking. And then he started digging into my life. And he said, this is not the night. You need to not do this. You need to stop this thought.
Oh, my gosh.
You need to stop this thought. You got that to take care of. Even though it wasn't your doing, you got some responsibility there now. And I'm like, okay. And so it was a good 30-minute conversation.
Wow.
And I stopped the car to let him out because he's like, okay, I'll get out here. And I'm like, okay, I stopped the car. And he opened the door, and I realized I was where I had been the whole time. We never really left. But I swear I was driving around for 30 minutes, stopping at lights.
Yeah.
So
Was he a person?
here, we'll get to that in a minute. So he gets out of the car, the door shuts, and I'm like, this is just weird. How am I where I was? It's been half an hour. I didn't sit by the side of the road for half an hour because somebody would have come by and honked.
Yeah.
So I pull away, and as I'm pulling away, I look, and it's a soybean field, and it's November, so there's nothing in the field, and there's no one around.
Oh, my God.
Not a soul. I'm like, okay. So I did what every smart person does. I went home and tried to ignore it for a long time. I didn't really start reading the daily read that I was assigned until much later in life. Although the goal being stop Vern from doing something permanently stupid. And he called me stupid in that conversation, by the way. He said, you're being stupid. So angels and God will use whatever words they have to use to get your attention. And so the goal being stop Vern from doing something stupid was achieved. The goal, get Vern to actively pursue what he's been called to do, that was delayed for quite a bit of time.
Wow. So. Hebrews says that we
have a guardian angel.
Yeah.
Yep, it does. We have a guardian angel. That's true.
And what was that one more time? You said 1 proverb a day, 5 Psalms?
Yeah, 31 Proverbs, so there's 1 proverb a day, and there's 150 Psalms, so it's 5 Psalms a day.
That's pretty cool.
Except for the 31st.
That's pretty cool.
So you'd never heard that before, and you're a minister.
I know. That should be disbarred. I don't know.
That's not my point. My point is,
I've never heard that. I've heard 31 Psalms or 31 Proverbs.
Proverbs,
but
one a
never
day.
how many
Yeah.
Psalms.
Yeah, I mean, I have said that to a few people. I don't share that with a lot of people just because it's so personal and it's.
As we record it. For the internet.
Well, yeah. Now it's out to the world. Hey, but it's also aggravating to me that I was, as I was called, stiff-necked and stupid because I didn't act on it right away. Obviously, my life is what He planned.
Yeah.
Right. Because God knows the beginning from the end, so it's not like He didn't know I wasn't going to act on it. But it makes me feel ridiculous that I didn't. So
That's wild, though.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, and I've talked to other people and I've said, hey, five Psalms and one proverb a day, and they go, and I'm thinking, why would he tell me that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's thousands of ministers.
Yeah. But
So somebody's got to know it.
people don't listen to us.
It's not just me. He's got to have told other
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, that's my that's where I've been.
Wow. So I'll start with this. As you know, Matthew 24, the famous end times predicting chapter. Jesus makes a statement in there where he says, we don't know the day or the hour, but we will know the season. So where do you think we are in that season? Are we in that season?
We are flat marching down that road.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, we could go 1,000 ways with this part of the conversation. So when Jesus took on human form, he limited himself, because he is God, he limited his knowledge in some respects. That's one thing. That's why he said, I don't know, but the Father knows.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, you're the same people. Well, when he had human form, there were things he did not permit himself to do. There's also spots in the Bible where things have been, like the color of the horseman, right? Kolos, everywhere else in the Bible is translated as green. But in Revelations, it's translated as pale or pale green. Because the enemy knows he can read, for one. For two, the Bible is God's character. That's what it is. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, the Word was God. So it's God's character. So every word in there has to be true, or God's not true.
Right.
That's just the bottom line. So if I'm the devil, I'm sitting there going, anything I can change, I can destroy his battle plan.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that it says pale in Revelations when everywhere else in the Bible it says green is because it would be very easy for someone to create a green or a green flag, or I'm sorry, a green flag.
Yeah. I know what
Sorry.
you mean.
They have a green flag. It would have been very easy for them to avoid green to make it not true. How about that? So I think we are right smack dab in it. The other thing I would point to, and this is not in the text, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the finds at Qumran, there was an Essene calendar. It's called the Zaduk calendar, if you want to look it up. And it talks about the 7 phases or 7 millennia of man. And we know 7 is the number of completion. And it talks about the age of chaos for 2,000 years, the age of Torah for 2,000 years, the age of grace for 2,000 years, and the kingdom age for 1,000 years to get your 7, right?
Yeah.
3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. And we know in Revelation 22 it says 1,000-year reign. So if you align that, they used that calendar to figure out who the priest was to try and figure out when Jesus, the argument over was he 30 or 32, was he born in 3 or 4 AD. People have used that calendar to point to a specific age of Christ because it has the priestly list for the families that were supposed to do the rabbinical duties in the temple in Jerusalem. So there's some credence to it. It's not somebody made something up and threw it in a
What age do you
clay
think
pot.
we're in now?
We are, so if you go by that calendar and you take out you adjust it for the Gregorian fixed day calendar and you massage it for the fact that God's calendar is really moon-based, right?
Yeah.
So like tonight at sundown is Rosh Chodesh,
I'm gonna back you up.
which is day 1.
Because I've said that to Christians before, and they're very like, "What do you mean moon-based? That sounds like astrology." But early Judaism was based. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, so in the most basic sense, it's an agricultural culture. So everything is based on moons and tides and those physical aspects. And in Exodus, it clearly says that based on the moon, right?
Yeah.
So it gives in, I want to say Leviticus 23, but I don't think it's Leviticus 23. I know it's in Numbers 28, it talks about the first day of the month, and it says the crescent moon
Yeah.
is the first day of the month. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if you're a Christian and you've not heard this before. But I think as we go on, you'll find out that there's a lot of things that we probably haven't heard or talked about. And I think that's all in Daniel, by the way. But anyway, the Zadok calendar says that there are, and it lays out the number of jubilees per millennia. And if you align it with where we are at Yom Kippur 2023, this is a Shemitah year, and then there's one jubilee cycle left before the start of the kingdom age. So that would say we're within 51 years of the shift from the age of grace to the kingdom age. Now, does that mean I know the date and time? No, it does not, because Jesus is always early. If you look at the Zadok calendar, Jesus' death, if you want to put it that way, although it doesn't say this is when Jesus will die, but if you look at the shift from the age of Torah to the age of grace, that actually happened at 70 A.D. Well, we all should recognize something happened at 70 A.D. that was pretty significant, right? It was the fall of the temple system, right? So Jesus came early, so all the things were in place so that on the 70 A.D. time frame, that last piece of the puzzle could come to shift the calendar. So, I mean, Jesus comes early, so we should be looking for him anytime, right?
Wow.
I mean, in that case, he was 40 years early, right? So we're right in there. And I think if you look at Revelations and you look at all the pieces and you start thinking about lining them up, we're certainly marching down that road.
A statement, are we doing good with audio and everything? Perfect. A statement that you make all the time that I want to unpack, and here's where we can get controversial. You say the war is here right now. In our form of Christianity, often in the West, we don't like to think about there's an actual war. What do you mean by the war is here? Or when you said earlier, we were having a talk, you said, are we going to be a goat nation or a sheep nation? Can you explain what the war is and explain what a sheep nation is and a goat nation?
So one of the things that I've learned, well, scholars all say that there's 4 different levels of understanding of the Bible. There's the literal physical, and then there's the Kabbalah, which is some say 4, some say 7th layer. And there's all those layers in between based on your level of understanding.
Yeah.
And I won't profess to even have an idea of the Kabbalah layer, because that's just all really spiritual, mystical stuff that I don't think I have the knowledge to even learn. But one of the things about Revelations, we have to remember that God's contract covenant is with Israel. Well, wait a minute, you just left all of us out. No, because if you read Exodus, it says, and the foreigners living among her, right? So that's where we're at. I think one of the problems, and I'm going to throw a rabbit hole out here.
Okay.
I think one of the problems that we have in the Western Christian church is we take that and twist it and we say, well, God's covenant's with us and the Israelites are just along for the ride. No, that's not the way it works. It's the other way around. So instead of basing our stuff on Constantine-driven Catholic traditions, which is what all the Western churches do in some form or another, we need to base our traditions on the original, the way as it's described in Acts, right? But anyway, the reason I go down that trail is now that you acknowledge that, you have to understand that God's got more than one group of people to deal with in Revelations. He's got to deal with the original Israelite, whether you're Messianic or whether you're rabbinical or whether you're not practicing. The covenant still applies to you. You'll have the choice to take the mark or not take the mark, as will all mankind. But then there's this second group of people, and that's the Western Christian church, because we were segregated, broken off from our roots, and we went off on our own rabbit trail with Constantine, Clovis of France, and a lot of those things in Daniel. And we're broken from our roots, so we don't really even understand sometimes how things are playing out. So when you read Revelations, you got to read it from the perspective of there's two groups of people here. So like the sea beast, okay? The sea beast has, I may get this wrong, but I think it's 10 horns and 7 heads. Maybe that's Satan. I don't remember. One of them has 10 horns and 7 heads. Well, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the Israelite people, then the horns and heads may be different than if you look at them from the perspective of the Christian church, right? Satan's an opportunistic being. He's not going to say, well, you don't fit my modem. I'm not gonna not gonna mess with you. It says clearly the woman and her seed, which is basically all mankind, but there's certainly a focus on the original tribe, Israel, and the foreigners living among them, right? So when you read Revelations, you got to kind of temper it with that. I mean, Jonathan Cahn has a great book out called the Dragon. That was it, the Dragon's Conspiracy or the Dragon Revolution. It's just hit the market, and he lays out really well the serpent and the attack of October 7th, 2023, and where that fits in Revelation from the Jewish perspective. That's important to us because there's one in time. It's going to deal with both groups of people, right? So that's one marker, I would say, that tells me we're on the road. I mean, he lays it out very well in his book. And plugging Jonathan Cahn's book, I guess, but I can't remember how long it had been 2 decades at least since there had been an attack on Israel.
Yeah.
The words used in the media pretty much coincide with the words used in Revelations 12 about a flood. Some of the news media was saying that the insurgents was like a flood of militants, a flood of combatants. Some of the newspaper reports said that the earth helped the people survive that didn't get captured or killed. Because they hid among the trees and the forest and dead bodies and such and such. So much like other times that God has intervened, people put things in the news or in speeches that say this was God, and if you don't pay attention, you don't necessarily catch that. So that's one of the mile markers that I say puts us on the road. Now the Western Church equivalent of that is kind of where we're at right now with choosing between good and evil in the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the goat nation, sheep nation conversation, right? So the theory, if you can call it that, is the sheep nations are the ones that align with Israel. The goat nations are the ones that align against Israel. Well, what's going on in our politics right now? Who are we aligned with? Well, it depends on the day of the week for one political party. So that's kind of a problem, right? Revelations doesn't specifically say anything about us as a country. There are some things in there about the great wings, the 2 great wings. People have said at various times that that's the United States. I don't buy into that.
Yeah. I feel like we always insert ourselves
into
it, and I've never seen it.
We do. I think, so to me, the great 2 wings that protected Israel during that time were the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire, which are the ones who controlled the land between the end of Israel and the rebuilding in 1948.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, those are the 2 great wings. Now, I mean, you could throw in there the Western Christian Church thing and say, well, that means the church went to America. Well, that doesn't really time out.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, we have to decide whether we're going to be a sheep nation or a goat nation, and I think we're making that decision this week.
Yeah.
I mean, we may make that decision, and somebody else may make it differently for us, but and maybe God's plan comes to fruition, right?
Yeah.
So
the war thing that we were talking about, when the war is here, obviously Israel, that's an actual war.
That's an actual physical war.
What do you think the supernatural war is right now in our country? Because if you read Isaiah, it talks about there'll be a time where people are calling good evil, evil good.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's a lot of identity confusion in our society. There's a lot of anti-God rhetoric. I mean, that seems to be building. Do you think that's supernatural?
Well, I mean, so the interesting thing about Revelations is there's a lot of times in the Bible the prophecy precedes the spiritual, or the physical precedes the spiritual by a long number of years. For example, in Daniel, right, the time, times, and half a time is about the time from the Western Church's position between about 620 A.D., the reign of Clovis in France, until about 1798 in the Second Great Awakening. That's kind of what that time frame is in Daniel 12 and 11. So you're, 2,000 years off between the prophecy and the actual, because Daniel lived in, 400 BC. But Revelations is not that way. I mean, it's the physical is playing out almost simultaneous with the spiritual. So yeah, there's the physical war we talked about. Then there's the spiritual war. There's are we going to be a goat nation or sheep nation? Are we going to sign up to continually perform things that God clearly says he hates?
Yeah.
Right? So to me, the spiritual war is quite simple. It's you either worship God, love God, trust God, and believe that every word God says is true, which means you were born what you were born because you were supposed to be that way.
Yeah.
You're not a girl trapped in a guy's body. You're not a kitty. You're not a frog.
Yeah.
You're a man or a woman. And the spiritual demons have done everything they can to twist and just kill that in an effort to say, look, God made a mistake. Well, what happens if you say God made a mistake? Let's just play that out. God made a mistake, and I'm really a girl in a guy's body. What did I just do? I just threw that out the window.
Yeah.
So where's salvation for anyone?
The rest of it
it's gone, right? Well, abortion, it's reproductive rights. Well, reproductive rights, how do you even collate that? If it's reproductive, then it's not a clump of cells, it's a fetus.
Yeah.
So you can't say it's reproductive rights and it's a fetus, or it's a clump of cells, so I'm not killing a human body. Well, then the word reproductive is wrong.
Yeah.
And it clearly says, shedding of innocent blood.
A lot of people have gotten pissed off at me shocker, for saying this, and I want to get your take. Abortion is not new.
No, it's not.
We can go back and look at the collapse of societies and evil societies. So all the times where I've said, abortion is actually demonic sacrifice. Not that everybody getting one knows that's not what I'm saying.
No, people do things and they don't even know it.
But can you explain a little bit about the role that killing children played in bringing these demonic gods almost to power, if you read the Bible, in these nations?
Yeah, I mean, so is it Ishtar? Was she the god of fertility and became the goddess of abortion? I think that's the one. There's three main.
There's Moloch.
Yeah, Moloch and Moloch, Ishtar, and then there was another.
Yeah, Ishtar I think is the fertility. Also, Ishtar I think can be male or female.
Right. So Ishtar's the I'm a trapped in the wrong body person, and Moloch is the okay. But yeah, I mean, in the Old Testament's full of sacrifices to Moloch, and they were actually living, breathing babies. And my understanding, I wasn't there, obviously, I'm not quite that old. My understanding was that the Moloch sacrifices occurred on orgy night. So there would be the wild orgy, and people would bring the results of the last orgy and throw them into the iron statue of Moloch that had a big fire raging underneath of it, and the music would be loud enough you couldn't hear the baby scream. So, but so it's satanic. I mean, the problem continues to be, though, since we've been divorced from our roots, People don't read the Old. I've been to churches where they say the Old Testament, it's gone. So one of the pastors that I look at some of his stuff said that there are and I don't know what he calls denominations, so don't jump up with the 4,000 denominations thing, but he says there are 4,000 denominations that actively preach Jesus canceled the Old Testament, actively, physically preach it. And he goes on to say they base it on Acts 15. They base it on, in Acts 15 it says there are 4 things the Gentiles can't do. And sexual immorality, food sacrifice to idols, and I don't remember what the other 2 are. And the problem they're missing is, do you really think a Gentile can go out and rob somebody and it's okay with God? So that misinterpretation of the Acts 15 argument has led to a lack of understanding of our roots, has led to, well, maybe it is reproductive rights, because it certainly isn't, sacrifice to an idol.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm sacrificing to an idol. It feels rather normal.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm sacrificing to an idol, shouldn't I feel something? And no, that's not necessarily the case. Right?
So, kind of keeping on the same train, you alluded to it earlier. This is always a fun one. Who, not literally a person, what do you think about the Antichrist? So we've kind of been given this whole narrative, I think, from the Western culture, Western church, from book series, from...
It's going to be a guy standing there?
Yeah. What is your take on that?
So again, you got to get back into there's the Israel version, there's the Western church version, because God cares about both his peoples. I mean, the end goal from God's perspective is reunification, right? That's pretty obvious, right? It's a marriage feast. What would happen at a marriage feast? A reunification. And the good news is I think that reunification has started, because there's a lot more talk about how the law interacts with the New Testament today than there was 40 years ago. 40 years ago, it was, we'll read this Old Testament verse. Now let's talk about the New Testament, and the sermon's on the New Testament, but now there are several churches that are focused on how the two relate, several TV broadcasts that are focused on how the two come together, how to discover your roots. And I really argue that you can't, if you picked up a mystery book, would you read the last 4 chapters and say you understood it? So from Israel's perspective, I think it's pretty clear that the Palestinian people are Satan's chosen implement to be the Antichrist, right? Islam and the Palestinian movement, it's very worship us or you die. It's very, very in line with the things that are written in Revelations. The 4 horsemen, the 4 colors of the horse, Palestinian flag, that's not a coincidence. So I think that from an Antichrist perspective, it's not a person. It's more of a entity, a thought, or an idea. To me, it comes down to worship. You either are going to worship God or you're going to worship something other than God. Now, whether it be the Bible bastardized or whether it be straight up Satan, it's something other than God, which is why God needs to reunite the church, because there's so many groups out there that think they got it, but they don't really got it. To me, it's you will either worship God, and that's one mark, right? Or you'll worship a man-made, satanic version of God, and that's the other mark, right? Adam was created on the 6th day. Things that are important are said 3 times. 6, 6, 6. Yeah. Day 6, Adam. Day 6, Adam. Day 6, Adam. Not Adam. Day 6, man. Day 6, man. Day 6, man. And what has man done throughout time? Well, let's see. Here's the law, Moses. Okay, let me write down some stuff. Here's my oral traditions that God told me in secret. No, that's not the way it's supposed to work. Oh, here, I'm a Pharisee. My entire doctrine is on these Mishnahs, and, it's just interpretation, but hey, They're divine because I wrote them.
So do you think it's going to be microchips and all
No,
that?
I don't think so. I mean, that certainly could happen, right?
Yeah.
Because the physical's playing out at the same time as the spiritual. But I think the bottom line is the spiritual, get back to your roots, worship God, right? Or stay in the world of Babylon and worship something other than God.
A
Right.
God, not the
A
God.
God, right? Yeah, a God. Whether it be the God of football or the God of money or a God. I mean, it clearly says come out of Babel, right? And what is Babel? Babel's confusion.
When you say, because people are going to jump all over this, let's clarify it. When you say the Palestinian people, or you see as the Antichrist, you're referring to the governmentals.
Yeah,
not
well,
the
I'm referring
individual Palestinian
No,
kids.
yeah, I'm referring to the idea.
Yeah.
Right. The idea, and good that you say to clarify it. The idea being the total destruction of a people of God. Right.
Is Iran part of that when you're saying that?
So Hamas and Hezbollah are two separate organizations. So if you were to ask me who the 10 horns are, I would not put Iran in that list.
Okay.
But again, it's playing out while we're talking about it. So I could be, maybe they should be on that list. Same thing with Hezbollah. I have Hamas on the list, but I don't have Hezbollah on the list.
Okay.
If you were to ask me who the 10 horns or 10 heads are. So yeah, it's so let's explore that for a minute. So the red beast, it clearly says in Revelations 12, is Satan, and it has seven heads? Check me on it. I can't remember.
Where is it?
Revelations 12, try 9.
Well, you have at it.
But you got a feather in your Bible.
I do. I found it outside. Are we good on time and on battery? Cool.
Revelation, I think it's 12:9.
While Vern looks for that, when I'm talking to Tyler, who's our producer, who's off camera. He's waving, but you can't you can't see him.
Oh, come on. I'm not familiar with your Bible. It's in the same order. It's just
I know.
the pages.
He used to
The
wear it
pages,
on the
yeah.
page.
The pages are different. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole earth astray. So that's where it tells us it's Satan. It's in 12:3. Yeah, 12:3. Then another sign appeared in heaven with an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns. So we learn from Daniel that those are significant. They are cultural ideas or kingdoms of people, groups of people.
Okay.
So if you were to ask me the heads, I would say that is based on those who want the total destruction of Israel. So, and you can check me on this, King of Tyre, it says in, I should have brought my notes. Is it Isaac? No, it's in, I can't remember where. But in the Bible it says the king of Tyre, and in the transcript about the king of Tyre, if you line it up with Revelations 12, 9, and 10, it aligns. So obviously he's one of those. If you read about the king of Babylon, not Nebuchadnezzar, but where it refers to the king, and it's in Isaiah, the king of Babylon, and you line that up with Revelations, those assets or characteristics line up. So that's another one. So it's the idea of the elimination of God's people. So Haman would be on the list, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't a king, but the king gave him all his power,
Right.
including the signet ring.
He had the ear of the king.
Yep. Well, no, he gave him the signet ring. He
Yeah.
gave him the ring.
Yeah, so that is the power transfer.
So Haman would be on that list. Hitler would be on that list because again, it's the elimination of the idea, and that would be
Spirit of Antichrist.
Well, that would be the Satan. So then the same thing kind of goes for the sea beast, right? It's the elimination of the people, which is why I say the Palestinian people, because that's their stated goal. Not all of them. There are plenty of
Yeah.
there are bad Christians and there are great Palestinians.
Right.
It's the political idea, not the people, right?
Now, the other day, which is interesting, I've heard a whole bunch of stuff swirling around. Gog and Magog. even somebody from the IDF, I don't know if you saw that, which is interesting, came on and said, this is the battle of Gog. And what is that? Who is that?
So, now I really wish I brought my notes. We just covered this a couple of weeks ago. And it's also in Jonathan Cahn's book. So the October 7th massacre, he goes through all of the international players, and he talks about people didn't see this coming because they're so far away. But if you trace back the roots, this is Gog, or this is
Yeah.
one country. And if I remember right, Gog and Magog both come out to be Minor Asia, which would be the Turkish area.
Okay.
And during the October 7th attack, Turkey was a money launderer for Hamas.
Okay.
They laundered money and provided financial support for purchasing weapons.
Does Russia and China play into this? Or?
So Russia and China are not specifically on the list that's in the Bible, and I really wish I'd brought my notes now, Chip. But there's a list of the countries that are there at the end, and I can't even remember where it's at in Revelations to look it up real quick. But Russia and China don't really fall into that. It's kind of interesting because my wife and I were talking the other day, and the Torah reading for this week, yes, I read the Torah reading every week. I practice Shabbat. Yes, I practice Shabbat. I practice the Sabbath. The Torah reading for this week was Noah and the flood, and we were reading that, and it came to dawn on me as you read the Table of Nations, it's really Ham's fault. If we could have just thrown Ham off the ark. I say that in jest because you know it's God's plan, right? Because what does it say in Exodus? It says in Exodus, I'm taking you around the long way because if you run into these people, then there'll be a war. And since you're my people, I'll have to let you win the war. And that won't be the end I have in mind.
Yeah.
Right? So it's no surprise, right? I mean, does God do evil? No, but God allows things because he has an end in mind.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if they would have fought the Amalekites and won on the way out of Egypt, then the remnant would have been, what, 1,000 people?
A couple more things, and then we'll close out here.
Am I
What?
making you that mad?
You so far. Me and Vern love to debate. So far, I pretty much agree with a lot of what he said. We're doing good. What is one thing that you think most Western Christians are missing? What is their blind spot?
Lack of understanding of where things come from and why they're important. If you cut a tree off from its roots, it doesn't survive very long. Mm-hmm. If it does survive, it's not the same tree. The roots may grow a new tree, they may not. It depends. But I think that, in Acts, when the separation started, and then Constantine took advantage of it and drove a wedge and made Sunday, which was a pagan holiday or a pagan worship day, our day, and denied Saturday, which was God's day. And then he started burying the knowledge, right? So I think that the place where we're most susceptible is, and I'm just going to make people mad. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Y'all get mad at me. I think the place people are most at risk is failure to discern. Oh, it made me feel good. It must be God, even though it was kill your mom.
Yeah.
No, you discern, and it says honor your parents. It doesn't say kill your parents.
Yeah.
God cannot break his own laws.
Yes.
Right? God will not tell you to break his laws. Well, what about the Israelites and killing the people of Canaan? That's a different case, though, because that's getting rid of cleansing the land. And it clearly says, I must cleanse the land from all this sin. What happens in Revelation 21? he cleanses the land.
When I think the Bible's clear too about the difference in murder,
Murder and
you know,
and
something like a war.
Yeah, it is. But you know, there's a conscientious objector argument all the time. But I think that's where we're most susceptible, because even if you consciously try to discern, but you don't go back to your roots and say, what does this mean? You're going to come out with the wrong answer. I mean, I would go as far as to say, okay, the Torah says, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Certainly, we're not going to do that. We have modern ways to butcher food and cook food.
Yeah.
When's the last time you ordered up a bucket of milk to cook your goat in, or your cow in?
No.
Not going to happen. Well, I don't have to worry about that law, because that's just for then. Well, what was the spirit of the law?
Yeah.
Mothers should provide for their children, not kill their children. So I think that even things that we just throw away as, wow, we would never do that, we're a modern society, have meaning and value and significance in the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
We have to remember that the realm changes at the cross of Christ, right? The veil was torn. The veil was torn for a lot of reasons, one of which being Satan being cast down, the other one being the ease of a personal relationship with God, but the most important one being the physical realm transcending into the spiritual realm, right? So the spiritual stuff kicked off at the cross of Christ, which is why Daniel's prophecies, although the Marah prophecy was the 63 weeks leading up to Christ, and then the 63 years, and the 7 years of Christ on earth and the temple being destroyed, didn't start until they started, because the spiritual shift is at the cross of Christ.
Two more questions.
Oh, okay.
I thought of another one, that's why. This one kind of goes back to our conversation. Both of them will. What is your take on the rapture?
As far as?
Some people believe in it, some people don't.
It's. I think it clearly says that there's not one.
Okay.
So, if you're a rapture pro person, I would ask you to look at the stoning of Stephen and Stephen's words and contemplate what those mean. I would ask you to look at Exodus, and the question you need to ask yourself is, were the Israelites removed before or after the plagues? They were protected, but that's not what we're saying, right? If you're a tribulation guy, you're not saying protected, you're saying not here for, checking out, got my ticket. And that's just not the way God has ever worked. Stephen's stoning, when he's talking about seeing Christ coming, and Paul kind of references it, is what we see if we read the books about, death and coming back to life. I see a great light, I see Christ coming. So I think that that's just death. And we're all going to die. Don't get that confused either. Ain't nobody going to walk from physical world to spiritual body without going through a death, right? Hebrews says all things will die once and be judged, right? So if you're a reincarnation person, sorry to blow that parade on you, but you're not going to come back as a snake or a shark. We will all die. So from that perspective, we will all get that magic tribulation, but where it falls in the timeline, I don't think you get a check out.
So for people who are like, well, when Jesus, we're going to meet Christ in the air.
Yeah, no.
What does that mean?
No, we're not. I mean, our spirit will,
Yeah.
right? But that's the death scene, right? That's the I saw a great light and I went towards it, right?
So when Jesus Christ bodily returns to the earth, do you think people will come up out of their graves at that point and meet him in the
We
air
won't have bodies then.
when he comes back to the earth?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that in kingdom age we'll have physical bodies. Okay. I think in kingdom, so that's kind of, I was kind of contemplating that the other day as well. So Adam and Eve, until they sinned, we don't really know much about them. We make some assumptions. When they sinned, it says God clothed them, right? He killed an animal to do that. So we say, oh, well, he gave them jeans and a T-shirt. And maybe so. There are others who say, well, he gave him skin,
Yeah, I've heard that
right?
as well.
So we don't really know what Adam and Eve looked like pre-Apple. And to me, since in Revelations 22, Jeremiah 31 and 32 tell us that in the kingdom age we can't sin because we won't have any desire to sin. I think that means we won't have a physical body.
So there's one part where I've read that the nations of the world will war against Christ.
Oh, you're seeing that now?
So you don't take that to mean Jesus returns and then all the nations get together with missiles.
Oh, I think that in the end it will be very obvious. Sorry, it will be very obvious that God intervenes. I think from an Israel perspective, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? You got France right now lobbying for an embargo of arms. You got all those nations now surrounding and very happy to wipe Israel off the face of the map. So I think the end of that's going to be very obviously God-inspired, right? So to me, that's kind of a spiritual aspect as well, right? They're God's people, and Jesus is, after all, Jewish, so he will step in and fix that. Right now, will it be a physical man, or will it be, if you read some of the discussions about the 7-Day War, where people said the missile just fell out of the sky, and this is before the Iron Dome. Yeah. The missile just fell out of the sky, like something grabbed it and threw it to the ground. Well, okay, that's God.
Yeah.
So I think we're in to see some very fabulous and mystical, miraculous things. And part of me says I look forward to it. Part of me says, oh, what? I mean, we know who wins.
Yeah.
Right? But you still don't want to.
That leads me to my kind of final question. What do you say to Christians specifically? And as a pastor, I've seen this almost my whole ministry life, which is astounding to me. But a lot of Christians are scared to death of the return of Christ, and where it should be like the best thing. What do you say to Christians who are just terrified?
Well, don't be lukewarm. Right? I mean, so what does it say? It says, and this is Revelations 2 or 3, if you're lukewarm, I spit you out. And it's not just there, it's in the Old Testament as well. So don't be lukewarm, right? So if you read the rules for the Sabbath, for Shabbat, it says don't light a fire. Oh, wait a minute. They had to cook. So what's the spiritual side of that? Don't fall in love with someone else, another god.
Yeah.
Football. I don't know. I mean, throw something in there. And that's, I think, the same thing here, right? It's the spiritual connotation and how that manifests itself.
Wow. Is there anything else that you think we should have talked about?
No, I mean, so I guess I'll finish answering that question, though. I wouldn't be scared because we know who wins. So if you're scared, I would ask myself, am I lukewarm or am I on fire? And if you're not on fire, light the fire. Right? How do you light the fire? Get in touch with your roots. Figure it out. I think the problem we have as a faith, as a Western Christian church, when you're not in touch with your roots, you can't convince other people to join your party. And I think that this unification started probably about 20, 30 years ago. And as more and more Christians become aware that, there's things in the Old Testament I should be doing, I should understand, not from a legalistic perspective,
Right.
from an I love God perspective. And then you won't be lukewarm. I liken it to, this makes my wife mad. So I have a sock drawer, and I, like most men, have different colored socks. I have gray, brown, black that are really thick for winter, black that are like dress socks, and athletic socks. And she wants them all in order. I'm a man. I could care less.
Yeah.
Socks in the sock drawer is a win for me.
Yeah.
Right? But no, she wants them all in order. Do I understand why? Not necessarily. She'll tell you it's to inventory them, but that doesn't make sense to me. So I will tell you it doesn't. I don't really understand why. But I love her. So when I put the socks away, what do? I put them in the order they're in. And I don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
So if that's not you, then you're probably in the lukewarm category. And if you're in the lukewarm category, fix it.
Yeah. One thing we've talked about, I know I said the last question, but you just made me think.
That's dangerous.
I know. And you might see smoke coming out of mirrors. I think the church has a sin problem.
It does.
And this is where we always love to debate a little bit, but I think we agree on that. Can you just touch on, and I promise will be the last thing, your understanding of grace and how to not abuse it?
Yeah, so once saved, always saved is another fun one, right? Because there are some who say, well, if you fall, then you weren't really saved. So once saved, always saved is true. You just weren't really saved. Maybe. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that the call is to walk, and if we're walking, to get better. Now, will we make some wrong turns? Certainly. And when you come back, what do you do if you make a wrong turn? Hey, I made a wrong turn. Sorry. Right?
Yeah.
And that's grace, right? Or actually mercy, right? I think we get mercy and grace confused a little bit too, because grace, if you read the Bible, is to teach us,
Yeah.
and mercy is to forgive us. So they are separate entities in that regard. So I think we get those confused. But that's mercy, right? That's mercy is, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, covered. Let's move on. And I also think that we get wrapped around the it's a free gift thing, right? Mercy's a free gift. Salvation's a free gift. Yes, but you got to open the box.
Yeah.
If you don't open the box or cash the check, it's meaningless. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we're supposed to walk with him. And what's it say? It says, be like Jesus. Was Jesus Torah compliant? Yes, he was, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have lived a sin-free life, and he wouldn't have been able to be the ultimate sacrifice to replace all the animal sacrifices, and we would be mired in the mud of our sin, right? So, yeah, the church has a sin problem, but it's even more scary when you look at there are churches out there that from the pulpit say grace and love and mercy cover everything. There's an honest to God church out there that says this. If I want to sleep with someone of the same gender as me and it's in love, it's good because Jesus was love. If I want to sleep with my child in a sexual way because of love or because I love them, it's in love and Jesus is love, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. No. And I think that gets back to that Acts 15 discussion. Well, yeah, that's sexually immoral, so that's even on the list right there. But I think it gets back to the loss of roots, right? My experience has been, we run around and say, sin, don't sin, don't sin, 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 no sin, sin bad, sin bad. Who was a comedian? But but we never sit down and say, this is what sin is. Well, Paul talks about that. Yeah, he does. But he only talks about a little bit of it. Moses talked about a lot of it. Adam talked about some of it. So it's not, you got to know the enemy. And that, to me, is part of cashing the check or opening the box. To me, grace abounds. But if you're not smart enough to say, I done wrong, you don't get grace. Right? You can have the get out of jail free card in Monopoly all your life, but if you don't get the go to jail dice roll,
Yeah,
it's meaningless. right? So you can have Jesus in your pocket all your life and be saved all your life. Yeah, there you go. But if you're not smart enough to say, oh, this pen I took home from work wasn't really for me to take home. It was for the guests. I just stole. Sorry, God.
Yeah.
Then you never ask for grace. And I think God will stand there and cry while you go down the drain, because you can't ask for grace if you don't know what you did wrong.
I think even in that analogy you just gave, there's a lot of Christians who may stop, but they never act and say, I'm sorry, but never return the pen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true as well, right? I mean, so, depending on what the crime was, 7 times whatever.
Yeah.
But if you don't know where the boundaries are, then you don't know you stepped over the boundaries. If you don't know you stepped over the boundaries, then you're not smart enough to go to your dad and say, I did wrong here. And if you don't go to him and say, I did wrong here, he's not going to come. Jesus never walked up to somebody and said, hey, you know what? This is you. You did this, this, and this, and this. He didn't do that.
Yeah.
People came to him and said, show me, teach me, tell me, right? Because that's not God's way, because that's not free will.
No.
If everything you do is dictated and preconceived, you have no free will. Now, that doesn't mean God doesn't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? So if you don't know the boundaries, you can't have free will. And if you don't have free will, then you can't make the right decisions. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So.
So 2 easy things here that I'm going to ask every guest that have nothing to do with our conversation.
It's 4:57 because of time change. No, I'm sorry.
So what is your favorite band? What are you listening to right now?
So that's a tough one, because I don't have a favorite. I started listening to straight Christian music a long time ago, but one of the guys that I have a kind of a personal relationship with used to be in that industry, and he's told me how corrupt it is. So there's a lot of bands that are on my do not listen to list. I'll give you a hint. If their website page says vote for the wrong party, the one that does abortion, then that's probably one of the bands that's on my do not listen to list.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But right now I listen to Skillet. I think they're for real as
Yeah.
far as a Christian band. I listen to a lot of older stuff. And you know what's funny is there's a lot of God in the older stuff. We just weren't smart enough to see it, right? Because God was God had a band, right? Lucifer was the head of the band, kind of. If you look at it. Now, is that good for artists? Maybe not, but it does show that God has an ear for music.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of singers that have written songs that you could easily connotate into being about God or a Christian song. You got to discern and you got to be careful. But so I listen to a lot of those. But Skillet, I guess, is the band I listen to. But I don't spend a lot of time in the listening to music realm anymore. I'm older and wiser, I guess. I don't know.
My final thing, what's your favorite conspiracy theory out there right now?
Oh, there's so many of them. You know what's funny? This is funny. You're gonna regret asking that.
Oh, great.
So if we were to walk down the street and say, do you believe in witches? We would get a large percentage of yes, evil spirits, witches. If we were to walk down the same street and ask, do you believe in good spirits and God? We would get, I'm on the fence.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Well, if one's there, then so's the other.
Yeah.
Right? So, I'm sorry, what was your question? I got lost.
It was, what is your favorite conspiracy theory right now?
Yep. So in that line, we are quick to say, this person orchestrated this, and this, and this. Like George Soros did this, and this. Instead of stepping back and saying, you know what? There's God. There's not God, Satan. He can throw together some pretty serious strings of coincidence too.
Yes.
So there's a lot of theories out there. Some of them are totally conspiracy theories. Some of them are just that war that we talked about. Satan inserting himself, trying to drive the conversation, because his whole goal is to make a word untrue, which cancels the whole thing. He wins then. And his backup goal is as many people as I can keep on the sidelines out of the war, the easier time I have with the ones that are in the battle. Right? So he will throw things out there, string things together, invent conspiracy theories just to make people go to get them out of the war. If you're on the battlefield but you're not fighting, you're not worth anything to God.
Wow.
So
That's very good. Thank you for doing this.
hey, no problem.
What a great conversation.
It was.
Thank you.
I hope you have at least 5 people watching.
Yeah, get ready for the flood of Facebook and Instagram comments. I don't know if you've ever been on my page.
No, well, I have seen it.
You know, I have haters and fans.
Well, that comes with the territory,
It
right?
does.
I mean,
It does.
so the problem when you're lost is you have to, it's like alcoholism. You have to admit you're lost.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like alcoholism. Until you're in the pit of despair, you're probably not going to admit you're lost.
It's true.
So how dare you come in here and tell me that I have to try to be Torah compliant because that means I have to give up X, Y, Z, and I ain't giving them up. Okay, your choice.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, but it's pretty clear to me.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
people will hate because they don't like being told
Anything.
anything. Free will, right? I have free will. Yes, you do. You can go up or down.
That's very true. Very true. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you got something out of this. Again, take everything that's said to the Holy Spirit, and He'll tell you what's true, what isn't true, what resonates for you, what doesn't. Our goal is not to, argue. Our goal is to get different perspectives out there. So God bless.